If I want to change the world, I have to change myself. For changing the mind is true wealth, is true health. My environment will never change until I change me, rearrange me. My thinking can never be the same. See, Gandhi went from lawyer to leader, changed his mind. King from preacher to Nobel Peace Prize, changed his mind. In fine time, align your mind and align the world. Liberate girls, turn child soldiers to child scholars. If you just believe that you can take your mind farther, but are you too comfortable to speak up on war? Are more of us shedding apathetic armor? I call for us all to do more. It starts now. So we can change the TV, but we need to change we. It only takes a minute for you to change your life. It starts with you, but ends with the world. That's right. You change yourself, you change your home. Change your home, you change your block. Change your block, you change your hood for good, but don't stop. Change your hood, change your city, your state, your whole country. That's how women got free, slaves to citizens. See, if it is meant to be, it is up to you, so do you. Unleash the power of one is all you need to do. That poem that I shared with you all is from my book behind me called Lies About Black People, and it's entitled Let's Go Upstander. It's one of the last poems in the book, and I thought it would be fitting for where we're going with this conversation tonight as it relates to finding common ground in these uncommon times. And I'm very excited to be with you all tonight because this is a message that we clearly need now more than ever in the work that I do as a speaker. This is one of my most requested topics. So let's get to it. The first question we have to ask is really, when it comes down to it, are we suffering from a challenge of the ego? And when I talk about the challenge of the ego, that's spelled EGO, edging God out. Is that what we're doing? Why are we here in this space? Why were you called to do this work? Why were you called to be part of this church with this experience right now? And why would you take that experience that's within you and then push it to the side? In order for us to really find common ground, we have to be grounded in who we are. But we live in a society where people often tell us that we need to push our beliefs to the side. But if your beliefs are foundational to who you are, you can never authentically engage in the work that you're doing. You can never authentically engage in the work of finding common ground because you're never fully showing up as who you are. And in order to do this work, it's going to take all of you. And I don't mean every single one of you, because of course that's true, but it's going to take all of who you are, all of who your experiences that have made you to be. So we got to check that ego. Are you edging God out? And then when you ask that question, are you edging God out? Are you also asking ego question number two, are you edging goals out? Right? Because the belief in the belief in God leads you to the goals. Right? And so in this work where we are nowadays, we need definitiveness of purpose. There's a lot of false prophets out there. There's a lot of people out there in political spaces and religious spaces and the like who are what the late great Julian Bond called cafeteria Christians. You know, they pick the parts of Christianity they want to talk about when a particular holiday comes around or when it's time to have a particular bill because they don't live it in their full lives. But when you live it, when you're about this life, it comes naturally, it's authentic. So you always got to have a conversation about that whole ego part. Now, one of the other books that I wrote is entitled Grow Towards Your Greatness, 10 Steps to Living Your Best Life. And I want to it's more of a motivational book, but I want to take the four principles that spell out grow, and I want to apply them to how we can use those principles to find common ground in these uncommon times. And to be clear, I do this work in lots of spaces. I've worked with all of the last three administrations in some way, shape, or form. I've written curriculum on leadership and the like for State Department. Like I live in this space. I'm not the type of person who talks about this but doesn't actually do the work to reach different people because then I would be a hypocrite. So, but the four principles that I'm going to share with you now have helped me in this process. And if you want like the poetry I share, Katarina, let me know. I'll email you those later. Um, so GROW. The first step is give. That's what the G stands for in grow. There's two parts of give we have to talk about. Number one is service. They say that service is the rent that you pay for the space that you occupy on this planet. And some of us are behind on our service. And I believe it was Dr. King who said, when it comes to Christianity, when it comes to our belief systems, he said, I'd rather see a good sermon than hear one. I'd rather see a good sermon than hear one, because at the end of the day, a sermon is a call to action. That's why a reverend, a pastor, and will write up they won't play the same recording every Sunday. They won't do the same speech every Sunday. Every Sunday it's different because it's a call to action for that week. So what is your sermon, everybody? What's your sermon, Carol? What's your sermon, Ellie? Like, people should be able to know who you are before you even profess what you believe in. And that's the part of giving, right? Service is the rent that we pay for the space that we occupy on this planet. Iona Van Zandt said that you need to give to yourself until your cup runneth over, and then give to the rest of the world from the overflow, right? So that means that you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself first so you can be fully present to take care of others. And we all know what they say on like the whole airplane thing. If there's any turbulence, put your mask on first before you help others. That's real. We'll get to that a little bit later. The other part of giving, however, as relates to finding common ground, it's about giving your time as an engaged listener. It's about giving your time as an engaged listener, David. So I'm asking you, Glenn, Chris, like, do we spend more time listening or do we spend more time talking? People who are not engaged, don't care about wanting to find common ground, only want to make sure that their opinions get shared first before the time runs out on the TV interview, before the Zoom call expires, or before. People are focused more on hearing themselves speak than hearing what other people have to say. We have to remember that we have two ears and one mouth, and we have to use them in proportion. But people walk around like we got two mouths and one ear, right? So, which would be kind of nasty. But anyway, so what are you doing to be an engaged listener? Can you walk into a space and sit there for a half hour or 45 minutes and say nothing? And just and use your eyes to pay attention to the marginalized voices, the people who are already walking in feeling disenchanted, and help maybe empower their voices. Can you be the one, Malcolm, to say, well, I see that Jennifer hasn't said anything this whole time. Jennifer, is anything you want us? We have to be engaged listeners. And all of us do this work to become better speakers, but who's actually doing the work to become better listeners? So you have to give your time as an engaged listener. And when you're in these spaces and you see people not speaking, they may be shy to speak up, find them after the service. Find them after the meeting. Take them out for coffee, something like that. And here, you could be in a room with somebody who was a child soldier. You could be in, Jason just got back from Ukraine. What's Jason going to talk about in the room? Or is there going to be silence there? Are we pulling this? What if Jason saw something that was so traumatic but doesn't want to share? Are we pulling that out? We got to work on understanding that success is better together. So we have to bring our voices together. And all of us can talk a great game. But real leadership and finding common ground is helping other people get their stories heard too. That leads us to release. The second part of grow towards your greatness is release. And release, there's two parts of release. You want to find common ground, there's two things you got to do at release. Number one, you got to let them go. And when I say you got to let them go, I mean you got to let go of people who don't represent where you want to go in this conversation. But you also have to let go of your preconceived notions. What are the ideas and stereotypes? That's why I wrote this book, Lies About Black People. What are the ideas and stereotypes and biases that you have about groups before they even walk in the door that have prevented you from having conversations with them? Maybe people of different religions, ages, races, physical ability. In this country, people don't want to talk about, DEI because this country, our thinking is so limited that we only see diversity as it relates to race and gender. Two of the areas America does a terrible job of talking about, right? But what about diversity of thought? What about diversity of religion? What about diversity of sexual orientation? What about diversity of economic status? What about diversity of region that you grew up in? There's so many things that make up that idea. But if we live in a society now where YouTube and all of these things are going to feed you the algorithms of what you want to see more of. So a lot of times people go online nowadays not looking for information, but looking for affirmation. So is that you? What are the preconceived notions that you had that you have to do the work to check, right? None of us are responsible for what we were taught about other people, but all of us are responsible for changing what we were taught once we get exposed to other information and new information. Like Dr. Maya Angelou said, when you know better, Roxanne, you do better, right? Those are one of her great legendary sayings. But a lot of people know better but don't want to do better because they're caught up in that other part of ego, right? The self. They're caught up in that. They don't want to lose face. They don't want to lose. They don't want to be embarrassed. It's not finding common ground. The other part of release, like I said in the beginning, let go of people who don't represent where you want to go. Being an upstander, not a bystander, can be a lonely process. But if you're guided in faith, so just so y'all know, I'm a big fan of acronyms. I make up a lot of acronyms, and I take other acronyms from other people. So just y'all just gotta deal with me because that's just who I am. That's how I show up, right? Um, Sometimes you gotta let go of. Anyone ever remember a show called Home Improvement? I used to watch a show called Home Improvement, and Tim something or other, and he had this neighbor, Wilson, and like you would never. It was a sitcom, and if Wilson would give him all of this advice, you never see Wilson's face. So one of the days, Tim's friend came, and this was Tim's friend from back in the day. They went to college together, party, drinking, all of that other type of stuff. But now Tim was married with kids, but his friend was still out there partying. And Tim went to Wilson and said, I'm having trouble with this guy because I don't know what to do. But he's been my friend for 30 years. And Wilson said, has he been your friend for 30 years or was he your best friend 30 years ago? People change. People change. And when their values no longer represent what your values are, don't be afraid to let them go. Because we live in a society, unfortunately, where you are guilty by association. People are going to, whether you like it or not. So if you're hanging out with 5 racists, you're racist number 6. If you're heading out, and just run down 6 sexist, you're sexist number 7. Like just run down the list. There's no middle ground. So let go of people and have the faith to believe that you are going to find other people who represent where you want to go. What does faith mean? Faith, finding answers in the heart. Faith, you got to find those answers in the heart. That's what that faith means, right? You got to believe that the right people are going to be there for you. And if not, you got to be willing to go it alone because you're walking in the path of righteousness. That's part of the goal. The second step, the third part of grow is overcome. You got to overcome your fears. What did the great motivational speaker Zig Ziglar say? He said that fear is spelled FEAR, and it stands for false evidence appearing real. Most of the things we worry about won't happen to us. But we also know that everybody in this room, I'm getting to know y'all tonight, but all of y'all come from powerful ancestry where you had fearless ancestors who did something so that you can be where you are today. That's a fact. I don't got to know your whole life story to know that. And if they fought for the days that they wouldn't see that you're seeing now, what are you going to do today to find common ground that 5 years from now, 50 years from now, 80 years from now, people are going to say, because Ellie did that then in 2025, I can do this in 2075. So finding common ground is about fearless, understanding that you're fighting for people who may not see the work that you're doing until a later date. That's what your service can look like. So you got to overcome that. And that leads to that W. It leads to that win. It just, believing that we will win if we don't give in. We will win if we don't give in. And so when we talk about giving, releasing, overcoming, and winning, this is what we talk about when we mean growth in action. Everything that I just talked to you about are actionable steps, are things that every single one of us can do in our own spaces. So we have that conversation of what the service looked like. These are some of the examples. And in some of these situations when we're in very tense conversations and arguments and debates and everybody wants to get their point across, one of the things that can help you find common ground with some of the most difficult people is not even debating them, but asking powerful questions. Because sometimes the questions are more important than being right. Sometimes the questions are more important than the answers, right? Someone asked a question the other day, would you rather have questions you can't answer or answers you can't question? And a lot of people in our society today have the mindset of answers you can't question. Don't challenge me. How dare you? And because you challenge me, you are XYZ. But sometimes don't even challenge them. Just ask questions. That's very interesting, Carol. Where did you learn that? Where did you read that? Who taught you that, Katerina? Um, and can you share that source with me? Those types of things in this world where people can get affirmed in their social media spaces with a bunch of bots and all of this other type of stuff, those types of questions can help put some people, not all, we're keeping it real, on the path of thinking, on the path of introspection, on the path of act. I can't tell you how many, and I know y'all deal with this a lot too in your church space, but I can't tell you how many students I've taught over the years that say, yeah, I was taught this, but now I see based on the questions you asked me, you didn't demean me. You just pointed me for, you asked the questions and then maybe say, can I offer you other sources that may share a more factual opinion, a different opinion, a more historically based opinion. We don't, just because you have the knowledge doesn't mean you got to shut people down. It doesn't mean you got to embarrass them. Just share and ask the questions that will send people home, maybe thinking. As a rapper, like the best rap to me, the best rap is the rap that makes me open up a dictionary, that makes me go back and listen, makes me go back and pull up an article, make me like just do things that'll help make people think, right? And when you do that, people will understand that you're practicing something called, Katarina and I were talking about kind of a spiritual entrepreneurship. Like you're helping people spiritually become better, as opposed to a society where people are trying to tear each other down spiritually and don't want them to build anything. And one of the things I love about what you all are doing is that a lot of things that I'm already talking about, in many ways, you're doing it in the work you're doing with youth, in the work that you're doing in the community. Well, what all I'm saying is we need an all hands on deck approach where what you're doing with those things, it's just got to be expanded. We just all, myself, like all of us, we just have to do just a little bit more. But what's beautiful about what y'all doing is you already got the foundation. I'm not talking to y'all and you're like, oh wow, maybe I should really think about like y'all are already there. So we're just talking about a couple of tips and tools of the trade that we can even use to do more to help find that common ground. I hope that some of these thoughts that I've shared with you all have been helpful. I'm here for all of the pushback, feedback, conversations and the like. But before I do that, I want to share another poem, if that's okay with you all. And I think that it is here because I just love poetry. Yes. They say that greatness is a choice, but what have you chosen? You've been frozen in time and broken in mind. For too long, the same song playing in your head, living in breath, but better off dead. But who said that you didn't have the power? Who said this is not your hour? You've been showered with a steady stream of words that kill your dreams. But since you're still breathing, then someone has lied to you, tried to deny you of your own potential inside you. If you just decide to, let no one deride you. Don't even let them get beside you as you unearth the new you. Stop listening to naysayers and decide to do you. No more pity party, sob stories, and boo-hoos. If no one told you that you're great, then let me be the first to. If you develop the thirst to drink from faith's fountain, you'll develop the might to move mountains. You see, we remove tons of dirt to find 1 ounce of gold. So I ask you to remove tons of hurt and just uncover 1 ounce of your soul. You'll set yourself on a true path of excellence, getting out of your passenger seat and driving your own car, reaching for the moon, but maybe only landing among the stars. You see, you have greatness inside you, but you must choose to be great. Blaze a path of excellence, leaving fear in your wake. All you need is already inside you. You just must believe in yourself. Grow towards your greatness and discover your true wealth. Thank you. And I will turn it over back to you, Katarina.
Thank you, Doctor. You know that Katarina told you we have a little Q&A if people have questions. Excellent. Okay, thank you so much
Absolutely.
for that. Uh, I could resonate on so many levels, and I learned a lot. And I love the acronyms because I found myself taking notes. There was so much really good information there. Grow. Um, I'll just say, just as people are thinking of their questions, what struck me is where I felt I really resonated was the whole concept of being authentically yourself and communicating that way. I also resonated with our our need to listen and how difficult that is, and that's something that we're not really taught. We're really taught to hear but not listen. And I also very much resonated with your first poem, particularly because we sometimes just say like, how do we change society? How do we change the world? And we're not willing to change ourselves nor our local environment, and how we have those are concentric circles. It comes from us. It doesn't magically happen top down by electing a leader or getting the right person in the right place. It starts with us. I love that aspect of it. Um, and I completely loved it. I do a lot of training in the similar space, so I just felt a lot of affinity with you, what you're doing. I did have one question. There's only one that I wanted to dig deeper on, and that is the question of letting people go. Because
Mm.
you, at one point, you said, which I think is really accurate, don't demean, you don't need to embarrass people as they're growing and people can change. I'm just wondering for you, when do you decide that enough is enough? That I'm not that I that I'm gonna put a word in your mouth like you're toxic. Like I can't have you in my life. You were a friend 30 years ago. You were a friend 20 years ago. You were a friend 10
Mm.
years ago. Now you were a friend, but you don't I don't connect now. How do you decide where to draw the line? And I'll just say that I know that Jesus at one point said, at some point he would say, you clap your sandals together and get the sand off them and you leave that town. So I mean, there is something about that, but we tend to do that pretty quickly too, kind of write people off. So where do you find this on a spectrum? How do you do it? Where you, because sometimes you're actually saying, I'm not going to demean, I'm not going to embarrass, not going to shame, I'm going to engage you, which you do really well. And you've worked with all the variety of administrations and all the variety of places. But then at some point you're saying we have to kind of let people go. That was the one that was the most interesting to me because I find it the most challenging personally.
So for me, and whether I'm doing this work in corporate spaces, whether I'm in schools, it's the same idea. When things start to drain you, it's time to let things go because you're not growing anymore.
Yeah.
When you're in a situation where you feel like you always have to pull people with you at your spiritual expense and your health expense, that's when you have to let them go and lead by your example. All of us have had experiences where we've let people go and they come around later after they've seen you do the work. Maybe some of us are educators, like myself, and like a fifth grade student, a 10th grade student. They were like the knucklehead in class, but then now they come back to you. If it's 5 years, 20 years, 30 years later, it's like I should have listened. When I get to that point, what I do is I just say, you know what I'm doing right now. I am just gonna try to plant some seeds with you that will hopefully sprout later, and then I'm going to spend the most of my energy with people who want to build with me. And because I can't be good for somebody if they're toxic for me. Like, how much poison do you want to take before you die? Right? It's like, do you stop in the beginning? Do you sip a little bit more? Like, toxic relationships are real. And so I got 10 people I could call up right now and debate and argue and fight with right now. But would I rather be spending time with them or with you? Because each negative, it's like how you got an apple, right? One rotten apple, just like a one rotten apple can spoil the whole bunch of apples, one rotten person can spoil your whole life. So I just don't have that kind of time. So I let them know I love them. The respect is there when they're ready to have maybe a civil conversation or be open to something else. But I can't be with them because in life, people are either bringing you up or they're bringing you down. There
Mm.
is no middle ground. Y'all can't have middle ground with that. Why would you want to be with somebody that sort of motivates you, that sort of inspires you? Life's too short for that. So that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really good definition about boundaries and
Yep,
protecting
absolutely.
yourself because if you get drained and you get pulled down, you are not able to help others. What I also really appreciate about what you just said that stuck with me is that you love them. So that's not a matter of not loving. And also that you plant seeds. And I think anybody who's done teaching or pastoring or anything else has dealt with the situation you talked about, which is someone who's quite hostile in the moment. and they are a drain, and they
Hmm.
are somewhat toxic, and they do. But you hope that by the grace of God, that seeds have been planted through God, and that they'll remember it at a different point and come
That's right.
back.
That's
And
right.
I think that you've had that experience. I've had that experience. So that's a really good way of looking at it, because I find that a very tough topic. I really think it's beautiful the way you described how you handle it. Thank you.
Hmm.
I want to open it up to anybody else in the room who has a question or a comment or anything else.
And we have
And
some comments in the chat, right?
okay,
Oh,
it says, Ellie says, thanks for a great talk. I would love your thoughts on one. How can we be humble and learn from others when we are wrong? Two, what has it been like working with different administrations? So we'll
okay.
come, yeah. So the first question is, how can we be humble and learn from others when we are wrong? So I don't know if you need to.
You gotta just stop trying to save face. Stop trying to save face. And one of the things when you realize that you're wrong, sometimes some of us can't admit being wrong in public. Some of us have to do it privately or whatever. But what's most important is that you do it. We have to understand that we all don't know everything, and you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead where you don't go. So, but it's like being wrong. It's not even about, to me, it's not even about being humble when your spirit's in the right place, right? Because when you're wrong, it's just like, okay, I don't know. I thought Bogota was the capital of Ukraine. Like that's just a wrong thing. It doesn't mean your heart's in the wrong place, right? But take it to a deeper level, right? When we say something like, I just naturally thought that black people were bad at swimming, which is one of the chapters in my book. Okay, this is what I thought. What's the truth? Right? When you realize that you're wrong, realizing that you're wrong about something should set you on a path to find a deeper truth. So don't, just accept it, move forward, and demonstrate the same type of attitude that you would want people to demonstrate with you when you show that they're wrong about something. A lot of people don't know how to accept being wrong. If you look at these news shows nowadays, notice how they never really have opposing guests talk at the same time because people don't want to be fact checked in real life, in real time.
Mhm.
So to have one guest, this is the Republican perspective, then don't have the Democrat perspective. But all of us back in the day, they used to have people at the same time go back and forth. But now, because of like this infotainment age that we live in, people just share stuff looking for clicks. So people aren't on these TV shows aren't interested in facts. So that's how I do it. That's how I deal with it. Working with both administrations. So I worked with the current administration the first time around in 2016 through the State Department. I went and I did some leadership trainings in Rwandan youth, and that was interesting because I was in Rwanda when Trump called African countries blank hole countries. If some of y'all recall that, and so
Yes.
African leaders were calling in the U.S. ambassadors to be like, "What's going on?" and so on and so forth. So I was seeing in real time some of the consequences of the negative thoughts he had about Africans while I was on the continent. Working with the Obama administration, I was working with their YALI program, Young African Leaders Initiative, and I was creating online courses for young youth African youth leaders. That was like over a decade ago, and some of them are still using them today. So the difference is one was more hands-on. I was creating content. The other one, it was kind of more of an indirect thing because in his first administration, he wasn't fully aware of the workings of everything. So like the state, he wasn't spending as much attention on the State Department that he is right now. Those are my experiences.
Excellent. And then they wrote that I think talking about when I was asking that question about drains, toxic people, they were thinking, Matthias is with Ellie, that they think it's whether the person themselves is loving and trying their best. So you're also judging the what's their intention, what's their motivation, is there and would that be true for you when you're dealing with people who are draining me, possibly that look at their motivations and intentions?
Intentions are more important than love, as far as I'm concerned. If I know somebody is well intentioned, I can deal with them through thick and thin. I may still have certain types of boundaries, but I know that they are not intentionally trying to bring me down. They're not intentionally trying to sabotage me. Even in marriages, I feel like, the idea of intention is more important than the love. The love is a given, but intentions can go in all different directions. So if I know that somebody might be a little bit of a drain, but their intentions are good, I'm still going to have boundaries. I'm still going to have boundaries, but I'm going to be selective in how I engage them. I have, all of us have different text message threads. There are some people I know that are well, might have good intentions, but I know if I include them on a particular thread about a political issue, they're going to come back with all of this other stuff, conspiracy theory stuff, shoot it down stuff that I'm not in the zone for at this moment. I'm sending, so I'm going to send it to people who want to build constructively with me, even if they have disagreements. And I'll get with those people another time, but they're going to get less of my time. Time
I
is
love
most
it.
important.
I love it. And I'll just throw in a little Swedenborgian theology is that Swedenborg says that intentions are so important that if someone intends something good, but the outcome isn't great, it's more important than someone who intends something bad but does good in the world.
That's right.
So just to your point, it's really what is in your heart. And that's one reason why it's very hard to judge people because we don't often know what their intentions are. They might be saying they want to do philanthropy, but really
Mm-hmm.
their intention is to get public acknowledgement and or save on taxes or something like
That's
that.
right.
We don't
That's
really
right.
know about the people we sometimes highlight in our culture. So thank you for that, and thank you for those questions, Ellie and Matthias. I want to open up any other questions.
And while questions are coming, we talked a little bit about the heart. I didn't really get into that, a lot, but just a quick activity. I'm going to ask all of you to do this right now. Not
Okay.
at the screen. I want you to actually like point at yourself right now. Like actually just point at yourself right now. And the question we got to ask yourself is: are you pointing at your heart or are you pointing at your head? um most time right most times we find ourselves pointing to our heart, and what when the reason why is because you got to listen to what your heart's telling you, because your mind's going to lead you to your fears, your heart's going to lead you towards your dreams. And that's why the root of the word heart is hear. It's hear. You got to hear what your heart's telling you. And that's why a lot of us have heart attacks going to jobs in different places, because our mind's saying we got to get that paycheck, or have that conversation. Our heart is telling us you're supposed to be doing something else, and it attacks you. So we got to do more heart listening and have more heart conversations nowadays as well.
Beautiful. Love it. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I also just I love your ego edging God out, and I think to the question that was asked earlier about admitting you're wrong, somewhere we've been taught that whenever we admit we're wrong, we're weak. I think it's being reinforced again in the culture. I think it's being reinforced right now. So people are um, sometimes in public life blatantly wrong, like they made just a mistake, but they literally will not say that I made a mistake. So that we're getting to a point where it's like just keep saying over and over again that you didn't get it wrong, and it'll go away. So I think that's a dangerous trend. I think it is important to
You know what
admit
that's
you're
coupled
wrong.
with too? That especially dealing with kids, young people, I'm around them all the time, but adults as well in this social media space. Because in the social media space, everybody's got to put up the perfect image, right? They got to
Mm,
put up the perfect meal, like they got to put up the perfect song. They have to have the perfect outfit. They'll yell at their kids to make sure they smile right for the picture to look good on the gram, and then yell at them after they take the picture. So nobody wants to look wrong even on camera, right? So it's all tied in, and we're literally raising kids who don't believe that they can make a mistake, and if they make a mistake they are less than, right? And so I have three kids, and I'm talking to them all the time about embrace the mistakes, because the person who's never made a mistake has never tried anything new. So that's actually coupled with what you were just talking about.
yeah, that's a really good point. The social media life, and we see the spiking anxiety rates of young people since cell
Yeah.
phones have come out and been in use, and living that life online and trying to have the Instagram lifestyle.
Yep.
It's I think authenticity is going to come back strong. I think it's
Here's
coming. I think
hoping.
it'll be healthy. I think it will. Katerina, I see your hands up.
How do you approach listening to those who don't show an inclination to listen to you, particularly in this very charged climate we're having?
I don't spend a lot of time on people who don't want to listen to me. So on social media, I've had debates with people who have divergent opinions from me, like completely different opinions from me, and I will debate them for days if they're, like we just talked about, if I know their intentions are on the right, in the right place. Like, hey, I respect you, you respect me, but we really just disagree on this. I am fine with that. I have no, and I love living in that space. But if somebody, this is, and all of us have experiences. You've experienced this if you're a woman. You've experienced this if you're, older, if you're black, whatever. The first things that people will do who have no real interest in debating or have no skills to debate, the first thing they'll do is they'll question your own credentials, right? How did you get a doctorate? How did you get to become a reverend? How did you get that job, right? If you got like a blue check, a verification check on like Instagram or something, how did you get that, right? And then after that, when they don't have any language, they turn to insults. And so I don't even block people, but because they turn to insults, because people who are haters don't have a large vocabulary. So they turn to insults. And once they decide to insult, I tell them, I have nothing for you to say, nothing to say to you. When you're ready for an intellectual conversation, I am here. As a matter of fact, here are 2 or 3 resources you can read. Share me some credible resources, and I will check those out as well. And you can come back for that conversation. But until then, I'm moving on to a conversation for people who actually want to build. They don't have to, and a lot of people appreciate that online because I don't call people names. Like, if people are ignorant about something, that's just the truth. But like calling people like, really bad names, like I'm not here for that. So that's what I do. Like, I don't have to talk to everybody if they don't want to talk to me. Part of finding common ground is the common part. People have to want to do that.
Mm.
And so for people who don't care or who are only there to demean me or say racist things or throw like images of bananas or something at me or whatever, I realize that I'm not the person to have that conversation with them. And it's sad, but I'm okay with that because I can move to somebody else who wants to find common ground. I'm not trying to find common ground to everybody who thinks like me. That's not common ground. If everybody agrees, somebody's unnecessary. So I'm on a path to find people who have different ideas but have common beliefs like all humans should be respected. So that's how I deal with it.
I love it. And I think there's only so many hours in a day and in a week and in a life. And there's a lot of people that can benefit from what you're teaching or what you're engaging. And getting caught up with people who have no interest and are not open is just not a really good use of time and or life. So
Yeah,
these are tough times and it is tough to make those decisions. I would just add also, I think we have to make that decision about like who we're watching and on social media and what we're engaging in social media. I know that in my social media feed, it's gotten very coarse. It's gotten very coarse
yes,
more
yes.
recently, like more fights, and there's I don't know if that I'm attracting that or not, but like it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I think that also can be very toxic to take into your soul and your mind and your brain, and it's not good for kids either. So I think
Yeah,
keeping I think what I'm taking away today is the importance of looking for the opportunities for common ground, but also being aware of proper boundaries to engage.
that's right. And some of those people you could be debating with could be fake. I mean, there are actual bots out there, AI things that are just generating arguments and so on and so forth. It's just a waste of time.
It is a waste. But I'm glad that you took your time today to be here with us and give us your insights and your thoughts. And I appreciate that connection we have with the Cambridge Roxbury Axis and
Definitely.
and all the work that you're doing. And it's never been more important, I think, in our lifetime than all of us starting with ourselves, as your first poem said, the change begins within ourselves, and that we can't point at somebody else or them or why aren't they doing this? It's what are we doing in our own hearts and our own lives in the community that we're building? So
That's
thank
right.
you so much, Doctor. We really appreciate your comments today and your poetry and your life of work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Y'all take care.
Thank you.